Well, once again, I'm on the road with a live stream. This time it is Boston. Greetings, brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. Today is April 14th, and we are in Boston. And tomorrow I'm running the Boston Marathon. Andrew and Karen are going to cheer me on. Just a mile away from our hotel. They've got a little bit of a walk, but not too bad at all. And I'll be surrounded myself by over 30,000 runners, and most of them will be friendly. They'll be surrounded by people cheering us on as we get ready to run up the famed Newton Hills, including Heartbreak Hill. So most of the people are friendly. Boston is a great town, and we've enjoyed the day. And as we think about all of that, what if people weren't so friendly all around us? Well, one thing about Israel when they took possession of the promised land is that they were surrounded by enemies. And this helps to clarify the military nature of the conquest. They were encircled by enemies who wished them the worst kind of harm. Perhaps the episode in 2 Chronicles 20 is what was the occasion for this psalm, where Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, was threatened by a mob that included Edom and was headed by Moab and Ammon. So much for Judah leaving them alone as Israel made their way to the promised land, as we talked about earlier in our readings. However, there is just as much of a chance, probably more so, that this psalm was written about all the enemies that Israel ever had throughout their entire history, the whole lump sum of them as they encircled Israel. So, as we look at this psalm, the psalm's goal is more than that Israel be given the victory over her enemies. It is also a prayer that these enemies would be convinced and made to acknowledge or even to seek the Lord. So as the psalm begins, and all throughout, it doesn't mention Israel all that much, but instead it mentions God. In fact, the words you and your are found 12 times in these verses. God is always central in our relationship with Him. So, He is the object of our faith. Well, the enemies of Israel are part of a long conflict going back even to Genesis 3:15. Many had tried to wipe Israel out, as seen in the Bible, including Pharaoh, Sennacherib, Ahasuerus, Herod, and others. Some of these enemies were even close relatives like Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Others are not quite as familiar. We see them in this psalm. The Hagrites lived east of the Jordan. Gebal was south of the Dead Sea. The Amalekites were Israel's oldest enemy next to the Egyptians and were also located mostly to the south. Then you add in the coastal peoples in Philistia and Tyre, and you nearly complete the circle of enemies that confronted Israel. Assyria was certainly an instigator as well, using all these kingdoms as pawns in a gigantic chess match. Of course, with Psalm 82 in mind from yesterday, we realize that God is the one in control, and Assyria was but a pawn on the world stage to be put into place and to be utilized as God saw fit. Next in the psalm comes a long list of victories as the past comes to life here for us in prayer and faith. All the names in verses 9 through 12 are the names of those who were defeated all throughout the book of Judges. So keep this in mind as we read the book of Judges. And just as God cared for the pastures in the promised land that belonged to Him, so now we see in the New Testament era that God cares for His church, His sheep, His temple, and His people. Psalm 83 doesn't pray for a narrow escape or a minor victory or even a moral victory. It prays for a complete rout of the enemy. The purpose is not just that the enemies of God might be converted to faith, it is that the Lord would be vindicated. This is like the oft repeated refrain found in Ezekiel. Then you or they will know that I am the Lord. Thus, the final psalm of Asaph that we have before us today settles for nothing less than to see the Lord exalted over all the earth. Certainly, this has in view not only Jesus' resurrection when he was vindicated over death, but also Jesus' return when death will be fully and finally defeated. So there you have it, another psalm notched in our belt. And hopefully by the next time you hear me, I will have another marathon, this time the Boston Marathon, the granddaddy of them all, notched in my belt. Thank you for all of you that have been praying for us here in Boston, and I'll look forward